Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Tim Hills, and I'm historian for McMenamins, and this is one of my favorite things to do is hang out with the artist types. Not even types, these are the real things. That's ominous. Lyle, did you do that? So, how many people came to what was actually our first program of Art Pub back in November, which was the Joe Cotter documentary film at Kennedy School? You missed that. Well, seriously, we're going to have to show that again because it was really tremendous. But thank you for coming tonight, and we are going to try and make this, not even try, we are going to make this a regular series, and it will be here at the Mission Theater. We may not be doing monthly every time. To begin with, we might skip a month in between and just see how things go and who turns out, but we have great plans and some fantastic ideas for speakers and more even practical art, do projects and get folks to come in and learn and go out and do their own art in the community, and that's really the crux of it. So anyway, again, thanks for coming, and without further ado, let's get on with this program. For the past 20 years that I've worked for McMenamins, favorite part of my job is working with these guys. They're incredibly talented and creative folks, and to be in really an opportunity to blend what I love, two things that I love, art and history, is rare, in a forum such as McMenamins. And it's an interesting creature, and we'll get into exactly our experiences with that as we go along. But essentially, we're just going to have a conversation up here, and you guys can listen in, talk about, the artists are going to talk about their process, their inspirations, their experiences working for McMenamins. And as we do this, we're going to run through some slides that'll illustrate what we're talking about. Then, after we talk for a while, we're going to let you guys ask questions of them. So let's go ahead and start. Each of the artists tonight are going to say a few things about how they got to McMenamins to begin with. Why don't we start with you, Lyle? Lyle Hehn.
I'm Lyle. I've been working for about 27 years for McMenamins. My brother was a manager at Fulton Pub, Paul, and he hired me to paint a door to keep the customers from wandering back into the brewery. It's still there at the Fulton. It has a big hand leading you to the patio instead. And that was my first project in 1988, and it was a part-time job for a while, just painting decorative things, and then it grew into a full-time job because my boss, Mike McMiniman, was planning to expand the business. And I rode along on his coattails ever since.
Okay, next, Olivia Behm.
Hi, I'm Olivia. Okay, so I've been with the company, I'm a relative newbie. It's just been just about 13 years. And indeed, I was introduced as the new artist for at least the first 5 years I was working. I thought that it might be fun to do something with McMenamins, and I was in a place in my life where I was looking to expand my artistic practice, and I happened to find out that an acquaintance of mine went to high school with Jenny Joyce's son, and so I said, well, shoot, I might as well start with her, and so I invited her to lunch, and she was working at the Hotel Oregon. And I went, and we had lunch, and we just hit it off wonderfully and had a long lunch. And it was so wonderful. We actually hugged at the end, which is pretty good for a first meeting. And then I wrote a little note to myself, I don't have enough talent to work with these guys. And it was within the next couple of weeks that I get this phone call from Jenny saying that, you know, Mike had thought we needed more artists. They needed more artists, and she asked if I wanted to come and paint for a day, and I said, oh, yeah, okay. And then hung up the phone and jumped up and down and did a little happy dance, and the rest is history.
All right, thanks. Jennifer Joyce?
Thank you. That's very nice of you. Anyway, I started working for the company in 1993, and I was introduced to this world by Joe Cotter, who was a wonderful artist that had worked selling paintings to Mike Mcminniman. And one day Joe called me up and said, hey, this guy, Mike Mcminniman, who he bought the Poor Farm out in Troutdale, and there's 110 doors. Do you want to paint doors? It was piecework. And at first I thought, well, I'm not sure I have time. My husband looked at me and said, are you crazy? No, you're not going to turn this down. So anyway, I started out just doing piecework, a couple of hours a week, because I was doing artists in schools, which turned out to be a really great, it was a fabulous entryway into this job, because it was doing work in a semi-formal, semi-public arena. Anyway, so starting then doing piecework, working sometimes as a freelance contractor, sometimes as now I'm a employee. It's been a long run, and it's really been great. Anyway.
We have Kohleiha Bush.
Thank you. My partner was Joe Cotter. He passed away in 2012, but Joe was painting for Mike and since when? I don't know. The late 80s. Since the late 80s, and before that, Joe and I had a couple art shows at one at the Hillsdale Pub. I think it was in 1984, where we just showed our artwork, and I actually sold something there. and and then there was the Ale Quake at the Mcminniman Tavern and Pool, where we showed some art. And then Joe painted for Mike, and we had a couple kids, so I didn't do anything except that for quite a while. And then in 1997, I think I started painting regularly, like for Forest Grove and the Hotel Oregon, and been doing it ever since. So.
All right, thank you. All right, so why don't we set the stage with this company we work for? How would you describe it? I mean, I've heard the comparison before, and I can't say anything about its accuracy, but the comparison is McMenamins hires and keeps working more artists than anyone since the WPA in the 1930s. But how about, why don't we just start the discussion with what it's like and what drew you to McMenamins and what it's like to work here, and is it a rare, uncommon opportunity?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first time I saw McMenamins was, I think, when Edgefield was first opening, and I saw the art and borders in the hallway, and I just started going, I wonder if I could do that. And at that time I was thinking, well, maybe I could help one of the artists do this. And by the time I miraculously found myself part of the group, I mean, to me, to meet all these guys for the first time was like meeting Hollywood celebrities or something. I was totally agog and tongue-tied, and really, I would drive home from my first gig, the Hotel Oregon, learning how to paint borders, and there would be rainbows every night when I drive home. So yeah, it's been really great. And I have to say that I wouldn't be a fraction of the painter I am now in terms of quality if it hadn't been for being with this company and being pushed to expand and grow and paint all the time. I mean, it's a phenomenal thing for an artist to be able to do.
Thanks. How about the type of art that you do for McMenamins? Jenny, can you talk about that?
Well, we do a variety of different art styles. We do illustration, which involves Tim. Tim, he researches each location and gets stories, invites stories from the public, and then when he achieves a certain mass of information, he'll have a meeting. He will distribute information, and usually we have a chance to choose topics. If we are naming rooms for characters that are associated with that property, we usually have a chance to say, oh, I think I'd like to try to do that person or this event. And we take history and turn it into a picture. So it's basically historical illustration. Sometimes there's a funny component to this job that we illustrate the lives of very humble people very often. Most of the time when you're an artist and you get a chance to illustrate the life of somebody, it's usually somebody that's kind of significant or profound or a community leader. And this is, in a lot of ways, I love this job because you get a chance to illustrate the lives of people who have very humble lives. But they're still very interesting and they still have a story. Anyway, that's a component of it. We also do decorative work, borders in rooms, borders in bathrooms, lettering. Is a huge variety of techniques that we use that have, personally, I think it's made my art so much stronger because I've had to expand. Before I did this job, I was pretty much a landscape painter, and I really had to work hard to learn to do the figure, for one thing. Anyway, Kohleiha, what would you say?
I'm actually kind of don't know what the question was anymore, but following along with what
Jenny,
you.
No, I was kidding.
Well, one thing I realized is, I paint for Mcminniman's. It has made me paint stuff I would never have. I just would never have thought of trying to paint a lot of the things I've painted, and so it makes you be a much better painter, and you see things and makes you look at perspective and just. I normally wouldn't paint a train or a train station or something, but it's really cool when I don't know, you can make it. I mean, it ends up being much more interesting. It just pushes your limits, and you get better. So that's good.
Lyle, you want to add something, or?
Well, when I started working for McMenamins, I was already doing graphics. My training is in graphics and technical drawing. And so here was this company that had a very informal program for graphics. Logos were drawn on napkins and sent to the printer, and nobody seemed to know who was handling all the graphics or anything. So for me, it was a big opportunity. I saw that the company was growing and that I could get some silly stuff out there printed. I think my first logo was the Murray and Allen logo. And then Hammerhead and Ruby, and there's a lot of early logos. And I put them together manually, and I also did the painting. There was a lot of painting. The 90s were like one big giant project. And lately I work on computers to do the graphics, and it's a ball. I love it. I'm willing to sit there and wade through the software now, and I still do painting, but it's been 27 years of pure fun. They could take all my money away now, and I'd still be happy, but don't.
All right, so let's start back to the beginning of the company and how art evolved within the company kind of naturally. And actually, Kohleiha is probably the best person to start with, and we have photos of the Tavern and Pool. Has everyone been to the Tavern and Pool up in Northwest Portland? So how many of you went there in the mid-'80s? Excellent. All right. Well, you probably can testify to the fact that, as this headline says, in fact, it even says in the text of that's from the Northwest Examiner, I think. And it says the neighborhood's being, invaded by these new wave taverns, and this one in particular, the brothers are opening, has ferns and it has art, and they peeled the mylar off the front windows. But this was a new thing that Mcminamins was doing. They weren't the only ones, but making a comfortable, interesting atmosphere for people of all ages to come in. And part of that from the beginning was art. And Mcminniman had relationships with artists and continued to make relationships with artists, and had, particularly at Blue Moon, art shows. Artists would have art exhibits, and they would change out after a certain period of time. But at Tavern and Pool, they actually did Alequake. Did anyone go to Alequake? 86. This was a big deal. And Kohleiha was there, and she had artwork there. In fact, we have some photos. There's Mike and Brian actually down there in the lower one. Oops. So Kohleiha, you can see barely maybe, but top photo is her sculpture swinging from the ceiling there. Wow. But can you tell us a little bit about Alequake, and do you even remember Mike and Brian at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that city painting is Joe's. I think those three paintings up there are Joe's, and I think my brother played guitar. I think Peter Bush played there. So, but that was sort of a takeoff, I think, from Artquake that was happening also in Portland. So, Alequake. And they had music. Some guy, I think from the Holy Moly Rounders.
Oh, no kidding.
I think played. I didn't sell anything. But yeah, I mean, we filled the whole thing was filled up with art. It wasn't like you had to get. I don't think they juried anybody.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to put something up.
Did it draw a good crowd?
And yeah, it was packed.
Yeah.
It was packed with people. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Sorry.
Was it just a one-time thing, or did they do it more than 1 year?
As far as I know, it's just that 1 year.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry? Bring it back, yeah. This is Kohleiha's painting of Alequake that hangs in the Tavern and Pool. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, sure, Tim. Now you're going to show the rest of our art after that.
All right, so those are the beginnings. You know, there were these seeds from the very beginning of including art in these public houses. And what I want to ask you guys is, how did that evolve into where we are today? I mean, from having periodic exhibits in the Blue Moon, how did that evolve? I mean, Jenny, can you talk about, first of all, I mean, were there other pubs or restaurants doing this kind of thing? And
You know, this is the interesting aspect to this business, is that the person who runs the business, the brothers who run the business value art and see that, and it's really interesting because I think about this a lot. I believe that art adds a huge dimension to the whole business, but there's no metric to measure the value of it. And yet it took somebody who loves art to incorporate it into his business. And I think the whole idea of panels started when he asked the artist to paint doors. Because if you paint a door, it's basically a painting. It's not just it's not just it was a painting that illustrates something. And I'm thinking right now, maybe that made the brothers realize, well, why don't we do also bigger paintings and more paintings? Just to paint the doors might have been an introduction to doing the kind of illustrative history work that we do. And what do you think, Lyle?
Well, the panels, he wanted to do panels for the Cedar Hills Pub, which is an early pub, like 89, 90. And the idea was to do fictional beer advertisements of the beers the batches that had been brewed, like Transformer Ale, Hallucinator Ale, Hammerhead. And so we each got some panels, the artists that were on hand, and we did fake billboards for the beers, and that's how I did the Hammerhead logo, was for one of those paintings for Mall 205. And then we got to Edgefield. As you see, it was this derelict, huge place with lots of blank walls. And it was like you died and gone to heaven as a muralist. Joe and Scott and I, Scott Young, another artist that worked with us, were out there by ourselves, except for the jail, the guards and the inmates up the hill. And there was just tons of walls that we had to do something with. I think Mike at that time was thinking that we would get Edgefield done in 1 year. It took several. Yeah. Now, Edgefield was really cool back then. It was. It was an abandoned building out in the country, and we had free run of it. And we had all our stuff out there, and we spent many late nights with coffee, talking and playing the radio and painting.
now, Lyle, this was here before you got there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not my work. It's similar, though. And that's how the mascot got his name, Satan the Cat, only spelled with an I, usually.
Yeah.
He's one of a batch of kittens that was born at Edgefield before it opened. And he became a mascot, and then he became a logo. And his descendants, I think, are still running around Edgefield.
No doubt. So what I'm doing right now is showing the progression kind of Edgefield, and then the Crystal, and then Kennedy School. And as we go through the photos, do you guys want to talk about those projects and how things escalated, I guess?
Well, Edgefield, the Crystal had fire damage, which came back to bite us in the paint department when we put the murals up. Some of the paint is still just hanging there after 20 years. But we've gone back and repaired it. But yeah, the Crystal was also really fun to be in when it was abandoned and derelict, because there we were. We had the whole place to ourselves.
I have a good story about the Crystal. In the early 80s, the second floor of the Crystal Ballroom was actually kind of partitioned off, and there was, Joe had a woodworking shop up there, and there was another guy that made furniture, and we used to do the Saturday market, and my friend and I would drive our Volkswagen up this little ramp that would go up to the second floor, and we'd unload all our stuff there every week. And so I remember going upstairs to the dance floor and yeah, finding out about the floating floor, and some friend of ours was living in the elevator shaft, and I mean, it was really seedy, but really fun, crazy place there.
I think that Gary Ewing, the light artist,
Gary Ewing was
had a
around
studio there
sometime.
at that time also. He did a lot of light shows in Portland for a number of years.
Do you want to talk about the conditions of working, the challenges of working at the Crystal and at Edgefield? And
I'll talk about the challenges of working at the Crystal Ballroom. Lyle had a blast. I suffered. For me, it was cold.
well, there was no
cold.
heat, right?
There was no heat. The wall, we were painting on those big circles, and because of that fire, the firemen had, no. It was wet. The plaster was really wet, and we kept trying to dry the plaster and then paint on it and then dry it again and paint on it. It was difficult, but I loved doing the work, but the environment was cold. It's hard to find a bathroom, hard to get water. It was a challenge, even though I'm very proud of the work we did.
You were up high.
It was scary.
Well, the bouncy floor, we had the scaffolding set up on the bouncy floor. So we'd be painting very carefully, and somebody would walk in the room, and you had to stop because you're going like this.
I'm afraid I did that a couple times.
Yeah.
But I remember you guys in winter coats and like those gloves with no fingers, and it was freezing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the key is to get done quickly.
How about Kennedy? These are some shots of Kennedy School before the renovation.
Yeah, it is a trip to see how it was.
Didn't Scott do a painting basically of that? I remember.
Yeah,
It was a fun one.
yeah. Kennedy was, I remember listening to the carpenters talk as we were working. I think it was the walls were in worse shape than Edgefield because water had leached down the walls. And so they found out as they were working that all the windows and all the armature around the windows had to be replaced. And I don't think they had expected that. It was a huge job. But it changed that neighborhood just so fantastically, because when I first went to Kennedy, there was nothing there. Where New Seasons is was a parking lot with a chain link fence around it. It was really a depressed neighborhood. Kennedy has done wonderful things there, in my opinion.
Do you want to talk about what it was like? I mean, you guys need to answer this question, but my assumption is you were doing panels in your own studios and then doing on-site work probably later on. But when you did come to do the on-site work, you were in the middle of the construction site. And you were doing a dance continuously with the construction crew, who were madly trying to get everything done too. Would you like to talk about that?
I would like to jump in here because by the time I joined this group, they were all seasoned construction site workers. And after a year of really a cush job painting in Hotel Oregon and places that were finished but needed more stuff, I got in on the ground floor of the Rock Creek Tavern. That was my first construction site. And I'll never forget that first day, the horror I felt, the noise and the dust and, the porta potty that we all had to share. I could not believe it. But by the end of the first week, it was okay. And over the years, we've all really bonded with the construction guys. They're like brothers, Pacific Crest specifically. And now it's good. We come on site, we're welcome, they love us, and so we are able to, it sort of softens the suffering side of things.
There's a couple shots here just of construction. This is going on at the Crystal Hotel. And this is where these guys were working at the same time.
Well, not quite. I came in at night mostly.
Yeah.
And then I had the place to myself, and I had all the plug-ins and all the lights. And I could just set up and get out of there at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And it was quiet, and it was great. And so that was one way of dealing with the construction site stuff, is just to not deal with it.
And that's if that worked for you.
If it works, for me, right.
And
If
you
couldn't
still
work all
do
night
it that
long,
way.
You had to be working around people all the time, like moving extension cords and getting out of the way of ladders and, going, are you going to work in this room now? And they'll be like, oh, in about a half an hour. It's like, okay, I'm going to paint real fast. And then it was always a juggling act going on the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks? I don't know. But
Yeah.
It gets crazy.
Every location, people say it can't possibly be open by that date.
Yeah.
And it always is. And the last couple of weeks, they do 12-hour or around-the-clock shifts. And they get it done.
And you guys are there along with them.
Yeah.
Yep, and I soothed the anxiety of Anderson Construction up in Bothell, because I believe that was their first McMenamins project, and they were just really going nuts. And I said, listen, it just has to look finished. It doesn't have to be finished. And of course it wasn't, but it looked great on opening day.
I'm going to read a little quote, great quote from Myrna Yoder, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. But this came from an interview with her several years ago. And she says, "These sad, run-down, abandoned buildings feel like they get happier the more work we do. There's something about touching every wall with a painted border that's like loving it." Isn't that great?
I think that is really accurate. I like thinking of it like that, because these buildings, they really want to be used, and it's wonderful to give them a new life. And let's face it, people like to see old buildings restored and used, because there's a charm to them that that's irreplaceable.
Okay, so we're going to go through some slides. These are the doors, examples of some of the doors at Edgefield that all these guys were talking about. And it's funny, Mike McMenamins tells the story that, at first it seemed like way too much money to change these metal doors that were on every resident's room. I mean, you've probably all been to Edgefield to see them, and they're, fairly modern doors. They weren't original, but they probably had to be replaced when stricter codes came along. But anyway, Mike says, well, we didn't have the money to change the doors, so we decided, well, let's dress them up and make them look a lot better and make the feel a lot better. So that's why the artist painted all these beautiful things on the doors. And then he pauses and says, well, by the end, it actually ended up costing me a whole lot more money than it would to put on old doors. But he said, in the long run, this was much better. Lyle, is that down in the winery?
No, Pacific Crest has that in their shop, kind of stuck away somewhere. There's pieces kind of scattered and stored in random places.
But that is in the winery, isn't it?
That was in the winery, but they discovered they didn't want that door there.
Yeah.
So I think I've seen that at Pacific Crest shop.
That's funny. What else do they have?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I put a lot of work into that one.
And this is just kind of to show how, the artwork became such an attraction of all these places. You come in, and yes, there's all kinds of other things going on in these rooms, but the art is really the anchor and the draw. This, of course, is the ballroom at Edgefield.
Scott Young did that.
Yeah, Scott Young. Anyone know where this is?
Jerry's Ice House.
Well, not you, Lyle. Jeez.
You guys didn't know anyway.
This is the boiler room at Kennedy School, which is just one of the most phenomenal spaces ever. And I think, well, no, I was going to say this was the first place where Jeff the plumber went wild with his work, but he had discovered his artistic side. He really was a plumber with Pacific Crest for years. And then Mike said, well, hey, why don't you do something more creative? And he started doing, the gauges and pipes in the bathrooms, as you've probably seen, dials and things. But wasn't the boiler room really where his first opportunity to go wild?
It really is his place, yeah.
Yeah.
But I love this photo. Unfortunately, it's not super clear, but all these things are going on. Mike's fascination with light fixtures everywhere, and Jeff the plumber's plumbing art, and then these beautiful, really large and really stunning paintings all around the room. It's a great space. And then, of course, the crystal, the finished product with, life with the people and life in the paintings. And this, of course, is one of Lyle's paintings. You want to say something about that, Lyle?
Well, that's a historical figure. That's Ralph Ferrier, who ran the Crystal Ballroom in the 1950s when it actually had ballroom dancing. He was also in the coffin business locally.
Underground novelties.
Underground novelties is what he called them. So I've got him standing on kind of a coffin. You notice the microphone is connected to some mysterious source inside the building there. And if you look at this mural, it's depicting the place that you're looking at. It's depicting the very wall. There used to be windows on that wall, and it's still kind of bumpy. If you paint on it, you can see the window where they have built something behind there. And I have him as kind of a ghost, welcoming you to the Crystal Ballroom, or Hotel California, whatever.
And this is Kohleiha's. We're going through just a series of paintings.
That's hot club sandwich.
That tie in. There became, starting with Edgefield, these guys can tell you more. I joined the company, my first project was the Crystal Ballroom. But I think Edgefield started moving the company and you guys towards this historical intersection in the sense of celebrating community and the life that was in these places before. This is another beautiful painting by Kohleiha from the Spar, right?
Yeah. That's a hot club sandwich from, I think they were from Olympia. So.
Do you guys want to talk about how the history thing, how I ruined everything when I started with the company? I mean, you did have, even at Edgefield, you had freedom to more freedom to do what you wanted to do. Or no, I shouldn't say it that way, but more, you weren't structured into doing, primarily historically oriented paintings.
No, some of the work is just about nothing. It's just decorative because we didn't have enough material. We had a little bit of historical material from the people that used to work there who were still alive. And we had historical stuff about the Native Americans and the gorge. And that was it. There wasn't any research like you would normally have done at that time.
But that was a fun process, wasn't it, to sit down with people who had worked there and hear their stories?
Yeah, what they could remember and what few photos that were available at the time. But we didn't have anybody to methodically pursue it, except for Sharon Nisbet, of course, a local community activist, I guess you would call her, who saved the building, basically.
Well, before Edgefield, I don't think that there was even the thought of doing historical stuff. The Edgefield was sort of where it started happening.
Before Edgefield, there were like 8 or 9 pubs.
And you just painted like
Yeah,
whatever you wanted, crazy,
right.
wild.
It was very informal.
Yeah.
So Mike didn't have an input in what
I would paint at the Fulton, whatever came into my head, and I never heard back if it was acceptable. That stuff's still there. Some of it.
Yeah, and Joe, I painted at the Thompson Brew Pub in Salem, and I never saw him because I was staying at home, but the photos I saw, he painted everything, and it was very just completely all-encompassing psychedelic insanity. And that's what, he'd go and do that every night. It's like, wow.
Lots of fun.
Yeah. Okay, moving along, we have a series of beautiful paintings by all these guys that we're going to have to go through fairly quickly. Jenny, you want to talk about this?
This is my portrait of Walt Morey. Instead of doing a just a full-on portrait of Walt Morey, who wrote Gentle Ben, I decided to focus on Gentle Ben, holding a picture of Walt Morey. And I like to do these kind of cartoony stories of that person's life, because Walt Morey was really an adventurer. He was a really fascinating guy. I heard him talk once, and I really liked him a lot. And so I went and just illustrated the different times, the different kind of jobs he had in his life, and some of his more famous novels. So this was really a lot of fun. And I do like to paint animals, and I got a chance to do a little animal there, so.
And that connects to Wilsonville, is that right?
Yes, that's in Wilsonville. It's just 2 by 2. It's rather a small piece,
And here's a really fun one from Olivia that ties in with Mike's Bothell, but also Mike McMenamin's two loves.
Right. Yes, music and lighting. And this is up at Anderson School in Bothell, so I painted it fairly recently, and the topic is Hanson's Lamp and Music Shop, because this guy actually had a shop. It started out selling lampshades door to door, and then finally got a shop together to sell lamps. And then he and his wife, this is back in the Depression era, he and his wife heard electric guitar for the first time. It was really novel, played by a Hawaiian at their church one Sunday, and he got all excited and thought, I should start building guitars too. So he stole someone else's design and started building them, and then his wife took to playing it and loved it so much that she ended up teaching electric guitar. So they ended up having this lamp shop with one side being a music school. So I couldn't resist that. I thought that was hilarious. And the top of the center shows a bunch of little tiny light bulbs, and I actually got that from McMenamins on the Columbia, and I think there are other places where if you look up at the very high ceiling, there's lots of little colored light bulbs hanging down. And it ended up being a little easier than going through finding an equal number of hanging light fixtures, because the ones down below, each one was like doing a portrait.
Yeah, here's a new one by Myrna Yoder that's up at Anderson School. So do you guys want to say something?
Yeah,
Well, that's
Myrna-
classic Myrna.
Yeah.
That is classic Myrna. She started out as a wood print. She started out in doing woodcuts and wood print of really fine detail. And so still she's retained that love of it. It almost has a feeling of a print. And she loves two color. She likes black and white. She really has mastered old age in her paintings. I think you just recognize she's a fantastic painter of the figure, really.
This is yours, Jenny, right?
Yeah, that's a straight portrait of Sharon Nisbet, who really was the person who saved Edgefield. She, we called her she was called the Queen of Troutdale. She worked with the Historical Society, and they managed to preserve Edgefield and invite McMenamins, and I think they were really quite crucial in making that happen.
I just want to add, just because I'm here, you don't have to talk about history exclusively. You can talk about technique or process or what's interesting in these paintings as we go through, not just
Okay.
historical connections. Although I enjoy that. Kohleiha?
That's one of my paintings there, to go to Edgefield in the library near the winery wing. The guy in the back with the press is Davis.
Oh, Davis Palmer, yeah.
Yeah, is one of the wine guys out there. I don't know if he knows that.
That he's a wine guy, or?
Or no, he knows he's a wine guy. I don't know if he knows that I painted him in there, but the rest of them are all made up.
Very nice. Another Myrna painting. This is from the Spar up in Olympia. You know, this makes me think of another thing I wanted to ask you guys. I know sometimes you bring in or you work from artistic references or you know, artist styles to bring into what you're doing. And to me, this always reminds me of somebody. I can't think who it is, but you know, are there influences or references that you guys have made in your paintings to other artists over the years?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I reference movies. I reference famous pieces of art. Botticelli. There's a picture of Ruby that's posed just like Venus. So yeah, it's fun to make references. People don't have to pick up on them. It's a good way to steal things.
That's true. It is a really good way to steal things. Just to go through an art book, I use references whenever I can. There's some just fabulous work out there, and it can be very inspiring. And I love Renaissance art, so I've used that too.
Jenny,
I use anything.
I'm trying to remember, Jenny. There was a painting you did where you were referencing Hopper. What was that?
I did the two gardeners. I did the main gardeners. I posed them just like
Grant Wood.
Grant Wood. That's it. The Grant Wood painting of
Oh, yeah.
what's the name of that painting?
Patrick
American
McKibben.
Gothic?
American Gothic.
Yeah.
But I just posed the two gardeners, just like American Gothic. That was fun. You know.
And Jenny, this is your great.
That is
Gary
a
Ewing.
big, that's at the Zeus dining room. And it's a homage to Gary Ewing, who is such a big character in the Portland music and light show scene from late 60s. And I just put a portrait of him as a young man, a portrait of him as an older man, his children. I think I have his, and a lot of the images from his light shows and references to the Grateful Dead. And that was really fun. That was a fun one.
Yeah, another Myrna. Beautiful. This is in Ruby Spa, isn't it? And what artist is she referencing?
Clement.
Yeah, that's
Klimt.
Gustav.
I think
Yeah.
Klimt.
Gustav
Yeah.
Klimt, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. She's really good at Klimt.
This is a real fun one.
That one's mine. The story is, should I tell that story? It's, there was, the guy there was the director of the poor farm. The caretaker of the poor farm, and every day he would drive his car around. Tell me if I'm doing this right, but
You're doing good.
drive his car around and he'd get out and see how people were doing, and they would bring in crews, I think from the prison, to work in the gardens. And one day he left his, he got out of his car and he left it running or something, and one of the prisoners jumped in his car and drove off. So after they caught him and he got his car back, he painted his car purple and painted a target on top of it so that nobody would steal his car. It'd be too obvious. That's the story. And there they are, not gonna go steal his car.
So I was looking at this.
Oh, and those are all the construction guys.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I was looking at it earlier, and I'm like, I know those guys. So that brings up my next question. Who have you used for models in your paintings?
I have a big mirror in my studio. 'Cause sometimes
Yes,
that's what's
yourself,
available.
right?
Yeah. For little things. I mean, like a hand holding a glass or something.
Yeah.
I've used my husband a lot. I get him to pose. If I have if I need someone to pose, I get him to do that. Help me out. He's helped me out a lot. But I will use employees, family members.
Pets?
I use employees and construction workers. I've used them a lot.
Whoever's
But they
handy.
like that. They like to be honored like that.
I've used Jenny.
Yeah?
I just saw a photo in my archive of you holding something on your nose, which I don't know what. I don't know why. But it was a reference photo. So.
And I know Lyle's used his family, right?
Occasionally, I'll need a picture. I can't find it on Google Images. I can't find it in any books. There's a position or something that I just can't find anywhere, and so I'll snag somebody in the house and shoot a photo and use that. Yeah. I needed a child riding a tricycle seen from below so that they could be flying around the Hotel Oregon on their tricycles. So I got one of my kids in their jammies riding a tricycle, and I put them on top of the stairway, which was slightly dangerous, and took some photos of her, and that was my model. Usually I use picture books. I have a big collection I collect cheap picture books, and they're my basement's full of them.
I remember when Lyle actually posed for me when we were working on the big mural at the backstage, and I wanted to have one of my characters. I was painting the managers of the Baghdad through the years, and one of them was going to be sliding down a rail, but on a magic carpet. And at first, I just wasn't getting the leg part right, trying to do it out of my head. So Lyle sat on some stairs somewhere in the building, and I was able to take one of those quick Polaroid shots, and that made it work out. I finally got the legs long enough. Thank you, Lyle.
You're welcome.
All right, Lyle, go.
Oh, that thing. Well, that is a reference to Alice in Wonderland and Da Vinci's Last Supper, kind of as if you had a dream about the painting and Alice came in and ruined it. It's got references to company history. I don't know. Now's not a good time to go into all of them, but Fred Eckert obviously is down on the end there without the hat. He's the Mad Hatter with no hat. The two wind goddesses in the middle are from Edgefield, and they're beckoning you to sit in the empty chair. And it's a thing I do in the paintings, is there's usually an empty chair that you're invited to join in. The fish creatures are from the spar. There's just all kinds of references there. It's sort of like a picture of the company. It's at the Hillsdale, and
How long is it?
it's 8 feet long. It's 3 feet by 8 feet.
Yeah, how long did that take you?
Forever. It's a very expensive painting. I took too long.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite paintings
Frankie.
of Myrna's. Frankie Baker ties in with the history of the county port farm, Edgefield. But it's just beautiful. What do you think?
This is the same Frankie from the song Frankie and Johnny. She actually spent some time at Edgefield, and there was a photograph of her. This has a lot of soul, I think.
Yeah.
That's at Oregon City. I did that a couple of years ago. That's the interior of a church that used to sit near the current location of the pub. Oregon City's history is complicated. The church was known as the Rebel Church because Confederate sympathizers in the 1860s attended this church. So that's why I've got a Union soldier up there who happens to be Robert Johnson, the father of the blues. Kind of like a little dig at the Confederate guys. Unfortunately, I got all wrapped up in the legend of the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And I started reading about labyrinths and how they're at the floors of many churches and cathedrals in Europe. I didn't know this. People used to walk the labyrinth as a path or something. It meant something to them. So I made my own labyrinth and put a ball of yarn in there as an allusion to the Minotaur. It's all mixed up, and the whole thing is taking place underneath the falls of Oregon City, like the church had been moved there. It's a mess, conceptually. The guy over there, the magic guy, it's also taking place on a stage, and he's raising the bridge. That's the designer of the bridge at Oregon City. And that's Ruby because I'm referring to the mural that I had to paint over for this painting to be hung in the Oregon City pub. I had to destroy one of my own murals from 1995 to make room for that one. I didn't care. It was okay. But I wanted a little reference to that previous mural. So that's why Ruby up there is holding a star. And I could go on and on. There's a lamprey because the lampreys live under the water at Oregon City. And they're really strange creatures. So yeah, that one's packed full of nonsense.
Beautiful Kohleiha one.
That was for Gearhart. I guess in Gearhart, every year the Chautauqua tour would come through, and I found references for lots of billboards of the time. And this one is depicting, well, I think it's John Philip Sousa. marching band, and the building there was really beautiful, the hall that they had their meetings in or their talks. And there was really beautiful trees. It was just, the photos are gorgeous, showing what it looked like.
That one's mine. Fred Eckert, which is also up at Anderson School in Bothell. I have been hearing about him over the years, reading stories about him, and just always thought, wow, what a cool guy. He was a great friend and mentor to Mike and Brian Mcminniman, and a pioneer in craft brewing and documenting all the craft brewing, the whole movement that came to be as long ago as 70s, 80s. And wrote one of the first books about home brewing before it was legal. And so what I did, because he was locally based, but this was up in Anderson School, I tried to tie together his association with, between Oregon and Washington, Portland, and Seattle. So I have lots of little references on there. Of course, you can see Hammerhead toasting him, but the little things are like the newspapers. He wrote both for the Seattle Times and the Oregonian, and I had a little photo of him when he started out before his hair turned white, and that's in one of the newspapers there. And the very first sentence in his first article in the paper is on that sheet, and it said, well, something to the effect of, the one thing American beers lack is taste. So I have a bit of Portland in the far right window, and Mount Hood, and then Mount Rainier and Seattle, and of course they're all right next to each other. And the state flower for Washington just happens to be the coastal rhodie, and the Oregon grape, of course, is the Oregon state flower. And so I just tried to put references enough to kind of tie the two places together. And unfortunately, like soon after I finished the panel, I found out that Fred Eckert died. And I was really hoping to meet him. I was hoping he would actually get to see this panel of himself. Not like I'm the first person that ever painted him, but anyway, I was sorry to miss him.
Is that a meadowlark?
Yes, it is. Which is the state bird for one of the states, and I forget which one. Okay, thank you.
This is up in the Anderson School. In Tim's research, there was a newspaper photo of the three Boon girls in the 1930s posing for a photograph. They had found a trunk full of stuff from the Civil War era from their family, including letters from one of their ancestors who had died in a battle. And they found his letters, and they found Confederate banknotes. And I took that as a point of departure. These women don't look anything like those girls. In fact, that's 1920s silent movie star, what's her name? No, German movies. No, I can't remember. She's very recognizable. I mean, her hairstyle. Anyway, I have them playing chess with the fire in an attic. The fire represents Squire Boon, who was their ancestor, Daniel Boone's brother. And Squire is losing. He's already lost. It's checkmate. All this other stuff means something. I didn't put it in there for no reason. But there's threes all through there, and there's triangles all through there. The whole composition, I went crazy with geometry and repetition and patterns and everything. So I had a lot of fun. I spent way too much time on it. I did.
The stairs going up from the attic.
Exactly. What the heck's going on there? The idea was that if they won this game, they had to go up into the next attic and play the next game. And on forever. They're stuck doing it.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right.
Oh.
This is, Kohleiha will tell you her latest endeavor.
I just have just about completed doing a redo of this mural in the brewery at Edgefield that my husband Joe painted in 1991. He started painting this mural that's 25 inches high and goes all the way around the border of the brewery. And well, I only had one kid then, we only had one, and he was just a baby, so I never went and saw what Joe was doing. And he worked on it, and as he worked and was getting around the room, the beginning of it was molding because they didn't have a good ventilation system. And so Joe actually never finished it. He got almost all the way done, and then it was just kind of futile. And he just did this amazing job in there. And Mike, a couple of years ago, just said, Kohleiha, we either have to just paint this out. They had been painting the walls up to it and the ceiling, but they were leaving this thing because it was really cool, but it was getting pretty gross with mold. I mean, it was not good anymore. And so he said, can you restore it? And so my son and I, our next son, who wasn't even born when Joe did it, went and checked it out, and I was like, wow, this thing is just wasted. We'd have to completely and utterly redo it. And so Noah, my son, one of my sons, and I went and traced the entire mural with, and there was places where you couldn't even tell at all what had been there because it was so far gone. Anyway, we traced the whole thing, and then we transferred that on to this fabric, this certain kind of fabric that you can paint murals on, and then we've been adhering it to a new, freshly repainted, cleaned wall. And so the upper one shows the original painting that was fairly moldy all along the top part of it. You just couldn't, it was too, you couldn't restore that paint. You had to just scrape it off and start over. And then this one is the one that I repainted and is now adhered onto the wall. So it goes around the whole thing, and the old ones that you're seeing are the better ones. There were some moldy pictures that were just too nasty to look at. So I didn't include them in this. It just didn't look good. But anyway, it's been a really big job, a really fun thing to do, and it was really nice for me to actually see what Joe had painted there. And there's a story, it's the history of beer, interpreted through Joe, which he never wrote down. We didn't have a computer then, because I've looked through everything I can to find out why he put certain things in. And I know he always had a reason, but Tim is going to have to make up the new story to make it all make sense. So
We'll have a few beers and come up with it.
yeah.
So this is your process of tracing? Is that what you're doing here?
Actually, this is the fabric, and I have already repainted it, and it's the back side, and we're gonna slather that side with this adhesive goop there. That's Noah. And then you put it up on the wall, and you use a scraper, and it's like putting up wallpaper. So.
You guys can take a tour of the brewery. They give tours in there sometimes. I don't know how regularly, but you can go in and see what Kohleiha and Noah have done. It's amazing.
It's a lot of feet. I don't know how long. I don't know. It goes around the entire inside of the brewery, so.
And it's a big brewery.
That is, Joe originally just had the little baby crawling across the floor, which was our son Leon. I decided to turn Leon into Noah and put Leon in as a little older brother. So just to put them both in there.
Probably everyone recognizes that. One of the iconic pieces.
That was the first time when I first started doing doors, I decided to just do natural history. So I just did birds and the background of different places in the gorge. And then one day I started thinking, well, why don't I do something else? Anyway, I put this together. This is based on an old German toy. And it was, the black rabbit was the mascot. And I thought, well, why don't I put a frog on that rabbit? And it worked out.
Why don't you?
Well, yeah, why not?
Why not? Frog, I call it frog Winnicotton. It's like that. Okay, this is another one. I just finished this one. And I put this in there because this is the story of a man named Ed Charbonneau. And he ended up at Edgefield. And we have no photograph of him. We know he was born in 1922 in northern Minnesota, a town called Crookston. The only thing we know about his career was that he was a parking lot attendant. And he liked sports in high school. And he ended up in Edgefield. But at Edgefield, he managed to make a little bit of money by knitting hats and scarves for the other residents. So all we knew was that that was the key for me. I thought, oh, I'll do these hands knitting, and then he'll be knitting a scarf, and the scarf will have images from his life. But I just think it was really fun to do this. There was no photograph of this man. Very little known about him. And like I said at the beginning of the show, he's a very humble man. But it was fun to make a painting about his life. So, and I was able to use my imagination quite a bit.
Okay, on the subject of having no photos at all, I love the story that inspired me to paint this one. One of the residents of Edgefield was a wife who had had a stroke, and she and her husband had owned land and a flower business in the Dundee Hills. And when she ended up at Edgefield, he was so devoted to her, he would drive all the way from Dundee to Edgefield every day to help take care of her, until eventually he sold the flower business and got a job as an orderly at Edgefield. And he was known for wearing cowboy boots with his outfit, his orderly costume. I had no photos at all. This is all my imagination, except for looking on Google Images at photos of the Dundee Hills, which was pretty easy to figure out. So one of the fun things to do is to figure out a way to paint something sort of unexpected. So you have the Dundee Hills, lots of flowers, and then the door right in the middle of it that goes directly into her room. And he's got his surprise flower bouquet behind his back that he's going to give to her when he gets in the room.
I don't think I've told you this, Olivia, but their granddaughter got in touch with us because she saw the name of the family name on one of the rooms at Edgefield, and they just live beyond Hood River. And her dad, which would have been their son, is 99 years old, and they want to come down to Edgefield and see the room and see the painting. And you really should be there too.
Yeah, well, let me know.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
How's everyone doing out there? We have such great stuff to talk about. We're going a little over, but I wanted to spend some time on the decorative artwork that these guys, that's kind of the other half of what they do. So if you're still feeling good, we'll go through a few more slides and stories about that, and then we'll open up the floor to questions from you guys. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. So
There's me.
we'll just kind of go through, but can you all kind of weigh in on this other part of your job for McMenamins?
Yeah, painting borders. It's actually a really nice thing to do because when we're painting panels, we're using our brains and really working to make it work. And once we've designed a border, and we all design our own as we go along, it's very meditative to go along and just paint a border. So anyway, that's, I don't even remember where that one is. I've painted a lot of them. We all have.
I mean, to me, what's amazing is how much detail you guys do put into these borders and the other decorative artwork on the walls and all kinds of other surfaces. Another Myrna quote that's fantastic is like, she says, you know, one thing about this job is you just never know what you're going to be asked to paint. On what surface you're going to be asked to paint on. This is up at Anderson School, one of the other artists.
Oh yeah, that's Patty Fortlina.
A nice thing about painting borders is usually, I mean, all the panels we're doing in our studios, you know, by ourselves. And so when we get onto a site and then you work in your own room, but then we all have lunch together, or sometimes two of us work on, someone will figure out a border and someone else will jump on and help do it. And so we actually get to talk to each other and, talk about stuff and help each other figure out colors and all, if something's working right or not. So.
Yeah, the team aspect is really important. It's great because we help each other a lot.
Where did the designs come from?
Well, if we know something about the room, then we'll do something that's related to the room topic. But a lot of times we don't know, especially on a construction site, what the room is going to be. So we have lots of resource books with historical decoration, through the ages, different parts of the world, and we will draw inspiration. We might find shapes we like, and then the color aspect is the most challenging because we're always trying to figure that out on our own.
Kohleiha, I think you just make up your borders, right? You don't use reference books very much.
I have reference books, but I don't know. I usually make them up, but I look at reference books a lot.
Yeah, and I use reference books, like there's fantastic books. I started out by using the history of this ornament. There's a whole wealth of material through the ages of ornamental and decorative art. And I go through those books, and sometimes I'll feel like, I love Renaissance art, I love Asian art. I'll just go through and look at something and turn it into a border, tweak it, because I ran out of ideas after my third room. And I realized I just don't have any more ideas. So I started using reference books. And what's really interesting about doing decorative work, you think a border in a room, why don't I just use that border again in the next room? The next room looks the same. It's very bizarre how each space really demands its own design, and I don't understand why. I do repeat some designs sometimes, but pretty much every room has its own unique design. And I look at it as it's like, well, that's what that room wants. It doesn't want anything else.
I have a nice quote from you, Jenny, from a interview we did many years ago, but you said about decorative art, you say, it's like doing abstract art. You don't have great expectations of making a great statement, and yet you can change the environment and really make it charming and uplifting and make people feel good.
I still agree with that.
All right, let's move on to pipe elbows. Pipe people.
Wow.
Now, how did this come about?
Okay, well, back in 2009, during the Great Recession, we were all basically sent home for a year. Not that there wasn't plenty to do, but you know, times were tough and the money to pay artists was hard to come by. So there's a longer story that I'm going to tell you about the origins of the pipe elbows, but Andrea Peterson, who is in charge of all the gift shops, and at that time she was doing Edgefield, invited us to make a little income by doing things for the gift shop, and we all got into doing pipe elbows, and I just happened to find this photo of ones I did for the gift shop at that time. And I mean, we went to plumbing stores to buy regular, oily, icky, gnarly metal pipes, and clean them and prime them and paint them. And they, to this day, if any of us find time to paint pipe elbows, they sell really quick in the gift shops. Hard to find because, well, these days we don't have time.
Now, which came first? Did you start painting the elbows that were in place in the buildings first?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That had been done for years.
Yeah.
That's why they sell so well, is because people recognize that from the buildings, and it's a takeaway item that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of mine.
And then moving on to orbs. How did, just another natural extension of something else to paint on?
Yeah, Mike at some point thought that that would be a good idea, and for a while he was adding orbs everywhere. It seemed like that's all we were painting. He's still adding them, but it's not quite to the extent he was at that time. We painted them as fast as we could.
Another on the Fred Eckert front and back.
Yeah, I did this for the Hillsdale pub just a couple years ago, not knowing I'd get a chance to do a major panel of him later.
Where is this? Isn't this yours, Lyle?
Yeah, that's in the west stairwell at Edgefield on the first floor, between the first and second floor. And like I said about Edgefield, there were a lot of blank walls. We had to do something. And a good way to fill up space is to make swirly clouds and folds of clothing. And so, yeah, there were lots of books about Asian art laying around Edgefield at the time. So that was a way to keep the exit sign there for building code purposes. Yeah.
Okay. I think we will end with what I think is one of the really great, I mean, from my point of view, one of the great things that you guys do, and that's to collaborate on a piece. And for anyone who's been in the Baghdad's backstage, this is, we'll go through a series of slides, but this is where each of the artists did a segment of this enormous, what is it, 30 feet high or higher?
You know, we had to order the canvas from California. It's all one piece of canvas. It's like 20 by something. It's huge, yeah.
How many people have seen that in the backstage? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the process of doing that? Olivia, I assume you took the bottom segment?
Yes. Yeah, well, we had this very tall scaffold, and there were, how many levels? 3 or 4? I don't know. It went up, forever. And I was renowned for having a fear of heights, so these guys all let me do the lower corners. But every time somebody would walk around on the scaffold, the rest of us would feel like we were either on a ship or a carnival ride. That's a very tippy top where Myrna painted, because she didn't have a fear of heights.
So I was right below Myrna. So she'd be painting up there, and when she'd press on the canvas, it would wiggle. And I was right below, and it would you'd feel like you were on a ship, and it would make you nauseous. It was a very odd feeling.
Look at that, though. It is like 3 stories high.
Yeah. It was fun. That was a fun
And there
thing
it
to
is, the
work on.
whole complete thing. All right, is there anything that you guys want to wrap up with before we open for questions?
The only thing that I just wanted to mention was it's hard for me to go into any building, like a restaurant, look at blank walls and not feel compelled to paint something on them.
I would just say that what Tim was saying at the very beginning, I don't know of any other place where so many artists are hired. I mean, a lot of artists get to work. Stained glass, tile people, the pipe guy, the light bulb. I mean, there's just a lot of creative stuff going on through Mcminniman. So I'm really grateful to be able to do it. So.
All right, what do you guys want to ask? Yes?
So when you're not working toward opening a new location, what does your workday look like?
Well, there's a lot of art maintenance that goes on because through the years, stuff happens to the art, especially the orbs, and I know because I've painted some of them 2 or 3 times, because ones that are at hand rubbing level. And then spatters on panels, and there's also the aspect of Mike looking at an existing property and going, wow, it'd be nice to have something here. Or lots of times there's just little additions to current properties that we have to add some decorative stuff to, or paint a panel or 2 for. So there's just stuff going on all the time.
Yes, back there.
I'd like to know, when you're not painting for Mcminimans, is your own personal style of relaxing painting different?
When I'm not working for McMenamins, I do a series of paintings. Lately, they're different from, they're not illustrations. They're more imaginative. Not quite abstracts, but imaginary landscapes is one of my favorite things. But I have it's kind of a different style, but it's in oil paint. What I do for the company is usually in acrylic, so.
Way in the back with the hat.
There are some logos that were done by others. Jenny did the Brandy logo, right? Morning Dew.
Yeah, I've done some. But I actually think Lyle has branded the company. That's the way I look at it. Because your symbols are just very powerful. And when I tell people I work for McMenamins, I know who they think of. They think of Lyle. Because you really, you really do the great majority of the graphic art. And that's,
I was trained in presenting artwork for print, preparing it for print, before I worked for Mike. And so they needed all these logos. They kept opening new places. And to answer the other question, that's what I'm up to between big building projects, is I'm on the computer putting together graphics and logos, things like that.
Yes, sir, right there.
Has anyone given any thought to putting together a book, a series of books? And I think those are things that people would buy, be very happy with.
That's the coffee table book problem. Yes.
Yeah.
It's been talked about. It's just too big and everybody's too busy. It's a big project.
Yes, sir, over there.
Occasionally we see some really just interesting things like a disembodied hand and a second color field. What's the inspiration for stuff like that? What was the thought behind that?
Lyle.
Well, I think somebody mentioned honoring the buildings and everything. I think of them as desecrating them, sort of a. I can't believe I've been given the opportunity to mar these big historic buildings with my nonsense. It's a feeling of mischief and dream-like stuff. It's fun to have that kind of stuff pop up unexpectedly. You weren't expecting the disembodied hand, were you?
Is there anybody way in back in the...
Way back here.
Way back there.
So are you guys all employees of McMenamins, or do you all have your own businesses and just contract it out?
Well, I was an independent contractor for 8.5 years, and then in 2011, I asked for a real job, and I got it. So I'm an employee. Yep.
I'm an employee.
I worked for 5 years, and then I was hired in '93, which was good because we just had our third child. And so I've been an employee since '93.
And I am a contractor, not an employee.
Let's see, over there.
I believe that Fulton is the only female restaurant that does not have a order. And I'm curious if you make that happen. And the second question is, in Oregon City there is a man riding a fish, which is my favorite painting. Who painted that?
Myrna.
Yeah, that's
Myrna
mine.
Yoder.
The restrooms at the Fulton have a long, sad history of paintings that have been put in there and then painted over and then more painting. So I haven't been in there. It's a women's room, but I'm glad that you noted that there's some artwork missing.
And the barley mill bathroom is very blank and sad, too. If you have a spare day.
Really?
We'll add that to our to-do list, both of those.
It's good to know. It's good to know.
Okay, over here.
So I came to Portland in 1979-80, and one of the first things I realized about the artwork was that it was also very creative, but also three-dimensional at times, and how much it had to do with people, and I'm in social services. So I hope that, and I'm curious as, do you know how much impact you've had on social services and really a lot of feelings for the people in Portland, and I want to thank you for what you've done too.
Oh,
Nice,
great.
thank you. Let's see, back there. One of you two.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys first because I've got my passport, and I never really appreciated painting very much until I got my passport and I started to go around, and it just really changed me a lot. And Jenny, I seem to be really like attracted to your paintings more than anyone else.
Thank you.
And my favorite one is the one of the owl that's just past the theater at the Kennedy School. And there's another one of an owl at the Roadhouse, and I was just wondering, do owls have a certain significance for you, or is...
I'm trying to remember the owl at Kennedy School. What do you think?
It's a very, very large painting, and there's a moon in the background.
Oh, you know what? That's not mine. That's Kathy Joy Young's. Yeah, no, that's all right. I love that painting, and I love owls, but I realized, no, she did a series of paintings based on letters of the alphabet.
Oh, that's right.
Remember that? And I think that's the one that you're thinking of. And I love that painting, so. Well, you know, but you bring up a good point. I think a lot of people don't go into galleries, you know, and here's a chance to have a beer or a glass of wine and walk around and look at art and to decide, what do I think about that? What story is that telling? And it's like what Myrna Yoda says, it's not art with a capital A. It's kind of middle-brow art. You can just kind of relax and look at it and try to figure out what is that doing? And I like having art in that environment because it's very accessible, you know.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to discount any of the artwork that you folks have done. And because the reason I said that, I'm from Minnesota, I came here 5 years ago, my girlfriend's from Canada. And you guys have created a venue to learn the local folklore in the most enjoyable way possible. You know, even to the point, I don't go to art gallery. It's just not my thing.
We should thank Mcminniman for that
Yeah.
idea.
But I mean, we go and we look at the art. You know, I didn't know anything about the pipe elbows, and my girlfriend and I, that's actually one of the things we look for, is the pipe elbows. And the thing, you know, that I didn't realize this was some of your intent, how you guys preserve the history of the common people, not the big name. And, you know, that really appeals and makes, to me, the Mcminimans an approachable, you know, venue, like I said, to learn the local history in the most enjoyable way possible. And I just want to let you guys know that I think you folks are making history, and you may not even know.
Here, here.
Yes, you've had your hand up for a while.
Okay, so I have kind of a two-part question. The first part is who gets to decide what the larger medium is, such as like if you're doing painting or tile work or things like that. And then secondly, how do you keep the style so consistent but still specific to the properties?
Mcminniman decides what he wants where. If he wants tile work or glass. And you know, it's really interesting what you say about consistent style. We don't all believe we paint the same. But we all do illustrative work. It's pretty hard edge. You know, it's not very...
Painterly.
It's not painterly. No, it's not. It's pretty hard edge. What do you guys think?
Well, since we're all illustrating history, then there's bound to be that thread through everybody's work. But tile work doesn't look like paintings, that's for sure.
Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Over there with the, yes.
So my question is about the smaller properties, your smaller pubs. Who comes up with the themes for them? You know, 205, Multiple Pike has a theme of a snail, and one of the pubs' theme is a frog. And in West Lynn, the theme is this wonderful golfing experience on the ceiling. Those have nothing to do with the local area or history of that area, but they're fantastical. Who comes up with those
Portland is based on one book that Mike McMenamins likes, which is Golf in the Kingdom. And there's a big golf course at Pete's Mountain. For that particular pub, Mall 205 was based on the signs that were fake beers ads. And the snail just happened to be in there because I put a snail in the picture. But the early pubs didn't really have a theme unless there was some local thing attached to it. Like Cedar Hills was about the airport that used to be there. So that's how that works out.
Let's see. Yes, right there.
Well, you said that there's a lot of artists, but you're the only historian that I've heard of. Are there a lot of historians?
Not enough. There is one more in the department of two. So yes, we're busy, but it's, you know, it's an amazing opportunity, amazing job. As we all could say, there's just not another company or opportunity like this that we've ever come across. And to be able to work with artists and musicians and coffee roasters and, you know, gardeners, it really is remarkable. So it's a lot of work. We can all vouch for that. But again, I can't think of a better job for me. Yes?
I have a question from an artist's point of view. I came here in '91, and that was an influence of why I stayed, the art and the feel of that. But when I look at it, and like I look at the eyeballs that are in the stairway at the barley mill, and I have this feeling that, like, if somebody had given me an assignment to do a door panel, and I'm there working 5 nights in a row, I would drift off one of those evenings and paint an elbow as a doodle. And that's the bigger question I have is, when you're given an assignment to do a big thing, do you actually show sketches ahead of time? And then are you also given the freedom to go doodle on an elbow in the wee hours, and they say yes, or they say, you know, were you given that freedom?
As far as the on-site wall painting, we don't usually do sketches ahead of time. There's no time for that. Panels occasionally. Graphics require some pre-approval because those things are going to get printed and there's going to be money spent on them. But my first pipe elbow was exactly what you described. I was supposed to be painting a border in that hallway. There's a pipe elbow. It's the most obvious thing in the world to paint a face on it. It's in the power station, the first one that I painted. There is a lot of freedom. It does get tricky once in a while, just like anything when you're being paid money for artwork. Sometimes you screw up or you get shot down, and it hurts for a while, and then you just keep going. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Is this your first one?
No, that's about 5 or 6 years later.
Oh.
That's at Edgefield. Yeah. Yeah, the cat has an earring because it's the alter ego of one of the women who has an earring. She turned into a cat. This is before Harry Potter.
She stole your ideas, Lyle.
All of them.
Yeah. Is there anybody up there? It's hard to see. Yes, I see someone waving.
Did Lyle also do this graphics for the stamp?
Oh, the passport stamps?
Yeah. Passport stamp?
I think they generated those from stuff I've done, a lot of them, but I'm not sure. I don't know how those were made. Pardon me? The people in marketing would know that.
He lives deep down in the ground somewhere. And no one ever sees him.
Once I do graphics and give them to the marketing department, they get changed or modified or printed on things, and I sort of lose control of the whole thing.
They steal your ideas.
No, well, I'm stealing ideas from other people, so.
Is there anybody else up in the balcony with a question? Nope. You have one. Okay, go ahead.
My daughter just loves those pipe people, and I messed up and didn't fire one at Anderson School when I was down there. So the stock market's been plummeting. Does that mean you'll be having time?
Well, I guess will be the barometer of how the market is doing if you see pipe elbows popping up in the gift shops.
Yes, sir.
So you know, I made up a bunch of words, those things that sound like crazy.
For how much?
You have a question over there?
How do you see the future of McMenamins? You guys all retire, I guess, as the lead painters. What do you see as the next generation of
Well, there's somebody right there that's
Yeah.
the next generation.
Yes.
That's Cleo.
Hehn, yeah.
After I retire, it can all fall apart as far as I'm concerned.
How could we go on, Lyle?
Exactly, right. Yeah.
I'm just glad you're younger than me because I know I'll be gone before you.
Am I younger than you? Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I hope somebody else follows Mike McMenamins' example, business-wise, and spends some money on local artists and history somewhere.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, you mentioned you did guy. Who did Ruby? Where did Ruby come from?
I did Ruby too. When I lived in Germany, I noticed there was a tradition of hanging little witch dolls in kitchens for good luck. It helps you cook better or something. And they're hideous little ugly witch dolls. So I was decorating the borders in the kitchen at the administrator's house at Edgefield in 1992. And rather than have a doll hang up in that kitchen, I painted a kitchen witch on the wall. And I was looking at old medieval woodcuts of women and witches. And so when it came time to do a logo for Ruby Ale, I suggested we use that as a basis of Ruby. And I don't know why she's holding a moon and a star. She has to be holding something. So that's where Ruby came from.
Yes.
So the tower, which you did, Mr. Hehn, which is fabulous, and I love that, especially the
Thank you.
original one. You have fabulous poster, which of course I framed to go along with probably a lot of people. I noticed on the new brochure, there's a new layer on the bottom of the tower.
That's right.
Will that one be in print?
I hope so. In fact, we need some more layers now that Anderson School's open. But I did that extra tower version for the website. And when the website was redone in 2008, that tower illustration was part of an animation on the opening page. It changed later on, but when you clicked on McMenamins' website, you saw that tower and some clouds moving by slowly. So that's where that one came from. But it needs to be updated because now the Tower of Babel is larger.
The Babel, anyway.
Yeah.
Up, way up there.
I have a question. So you're talking about new projects. What's next for McMenamins? And specifically, how does the architects and the designers get involved with how you guys do the artwork at the completion of the construction? You talked about the contractors, but not so much the design of the building. Remodeling them.
That's because we never see the architect. He's there in the beginning, we're there at the end. So I will answer the question about what's next. We are starting panels for an addition to the old St. Francis School in Bend. There were 4 rental cottages at the back of the property to be rented by little groups and families. 3 of them have been moved, and they're being replaced by 2 new house structures, and one of them is going to be the art house. And right now I've been calling and searching for artists who've had experience working for any of the projects over the years, and getting them all excited about doing a panel for the art house, which is really going to be about honoring the artists through the history of McMenamins. So that's kind of what we're doing now. There's lots of stuff on the horizon, but I can't look beyond that.
Yes.
Okay, so another two-part question. I was curious as to what everyone's favorite property was to do and why it was so like special to you. Like, what made it your favorite? If you have a favorite.
Baghdad, Crystal, Edgefield, Centralia, Fulton, and I can't tell you why. They're just they've got a good vibe.
Hotel Oregon. I love that. I love Kennedy School. I love Edgefield. Yeah, they're all, there's images in each place I really love.
Yeah, it's like trying to tell you which of our children is the favorite.
We all know you have.
Yes.
I was wondering if you have, I don't know if you would call it journeymen, who help you with the work, and if you have guest artists as well.
Yes. As far as people helping us, we actually, we do everything ourselves. I mean, we're never above doing anything. Let's see, what was the second part of that question? Oh, yes. When we paint in another location, like up in Bothell over this past year, and when we did the old St. Francis School in Bend, we do try to find local artists to help out. And when we go to Bend for this edition, we will have, right now I've got 2 of those that still live in Bend that worked on the original project that are very happy to come back and do some more. So that's one of the things that's kind of cool. Not just artists, but subcontractors, a variety of other artisans that do tile and stuff. When we're not in the Portland area working, they're locals to whatever property we're working on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a lot of the McMenamins properties have been known to be haunted. Have you guys had any experiences with
Kohleiha has.
I have. Olivia and I were working in Bend and at the St. Francis School, and we were staying in. There was 4 little houses on the property that were the nuns' house and the.
There was a friary, the nunnery, the art house, and then the parish house, which is still standing.
So I don't know which house we were in.
We were in the nunnery.
Okay, we were in the nunnery, painting. And we stayed there for the night, and Olivia and I each had a room, and so we had finished painting, and I probably had a glass of wine or something.
Oh,
and so I was lying in bed, and I totally heard footsteps going right by the door, and I thought maybe Olivia had gone down to go into the bathroom, but no, I never heard any coming back. And so I was going, wow, that's so weird. And I went out in the hall and I listened, and I went down to where the bathroom was, and I went and listened at Olivia's door, and there was no stirring, and so I went back and lay down in bed again, and then I heard it again, and I was just, I opened the door and there's nobody there. And it totally freaked me out. I wanted to go in and sleep on Olivia's floor. And I stood outside her door. And then I was like, no, it's okay. This ghost isn't a scary ghost. I'm not going to be freaked out at it. And I just decided I wasn't going to be afraid of it. But it definitely was, I don't know. It freaked me out.
I slept through the whole thing.
I think the eeriest place is the Grand Lodge. And there's a cottage called the Children's Cottage that when I worked there, I was doing a border there, and Myrna was working upstairs. And as soon as the sun went down, we wanted to get out of there. I don't know how to describe it. It was just like, she came running downstairs, or I went up there and I said, let's go. The sun's down. And it just had an eerie feeling. So I can't say it's haunted, but it definitely had an eerie, that place was eerie.
I have no experiences to share. I've spent my adult life at night alone in these buildings, and nothing's ever happened. Sorry.
That's because they're afraid of you.
That's right, I'm the
Yeah, they're
scariest thing in the
afraid of
building. I drive them away.
Yes.
I just am curious because I feel like you've done so much for Oregon and a lot of our buildings and our history and just kind of making things fun for us as well in Washington. Have you had other artists from around the nation come? Because I feel like what you've done for us in different ways could expand to other parts of the country.
No, I don't know. I haven't really had any contact like that, no.
I think you need another Mcminniman somewhere else to help it.
It takes money.
But not Mike McMenamins, because we don't want to expand that much.
Yeah, it really amazes me that somebody else hasn't picked up this model and used it. I don't understand why. I think it's because it looks like, well, we're spending too much money here and it's not you know what I mean? It's like you don't know, I don't know, people don't know how to measure it.
It's just so precious and beautiful, so. But it'll happen maybe.
Yes.
As artists that are hired to do a project, sometimes I know you're asked to do things that you don't really feel passionate about painting. Like it doesn't come through in your guys' painting. How do you keep you still in all of your paintings, even though it's something that you may not feel?
Good question.
Well, for me, you know, a lot of times I start out like that. I think, I don't get this. Why are we doing this? But if I research it and start putting time, energy, and thinking about it, usually I find a way. I find a way that pulls me in, but it takes a little energy to figure out. And usually it's like doing research and then getting hooked and letting that pull you in and making it work. You know, finding your own voice in that.
I just feel so lucky not to be doing some other kind of work. It's really not a problem. You're privileged from the get-go to do anything. The most simple border or the most mundane type of decorative task is still way more fun than other kinds of work.
Up at Queen Anne, they relief art on the walls up there. Who is responsible for those? It's three-dimensional. I mean, it's assume it's pottery.
It's kind of like an exposed painting you have on a wall, but the body is actually protruded out.
Oh, I think I remember that.
Sounds like something you did.
No, maybe Mike went up there and put some artwork we don't know about.
Or a carving or a plaster, applique or.
Oh.
I've never touched
Myrna. I think Myrna did that. It's, I think Myrna did that.
We're forgetting everything
Yeah.
as years go by.
We sometimes get other people's art confused with our own.
Are you making a video? Because this is lovely.
We are, actually.
They can go with your coffee table book.
Yeah.
The one that'll never be made, yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.